The morning sun cast long shadows across Adelaide Cottage, as Prince William stepped out onto the pristine grounds of his family's new Windsor estate. The picturesque property, nestled within the secure walls of the great park, had seemed like the perfect retreat for his growing family. Kate had fallen in love with the cottage's charm during their first viewing, enchanted by its ivy-covered walls and peaceful gardens where their children could play freely. What the royal couple didn't realize was that their private security advisor, James Morrison, had been losing sleep for weeks. Morrison, a former MI5 operative with 25 years of experience protecting the royal family, had discovered something troubling during his routine security assessment of the new residence. The Adelaide Cottage grounds, despite their beauty and historical significance, harbored secrets that could put the Prince and Princess of Wales in serious danger. The cottage itself sat on land that had witnessed centuries of royal history, but recent intelligence reports had revealed a different story lurking beneath its manicured lawns. Morrison's investigation had uncovered evidence of underground tunnels dating back to World War II, originally built as emergency escape routes during the Blitz. These forgotten passages, now partially collapsed and unmapped, created security vulnerabilities that no one had anticipated. During a routine sweep with ground-penetrating radar, Morrison's team discovered that several of these tunnels remained accessible from points beyond the estate's secured perimeter. The implications were staggering. Anyone with knowledge of these hidden entrances could potentially breach the property's defenses undetected. The Royal Protection Unit had always prided itself on maintaining impenetrable security around the family. But these underground passages represented a blind spot that could be exploited by those with malicious intent. Morrison's concerns deepened when he learned that local historians and urban explorers had been documenting these tunnel systems online for years. Amateur adventurers had posted detailed maps and photographs on social media platforms, inadvertently creating a blueprint for anyone seeking unauthorized access to the royal grounds. The security chief realized that what had once been wartime escape routes could now serve as invasion paths for modern threats. As William enjoyed his morning coffee, completely unaware of the hidden dangers beneath his feet, Morrison prepared to deliver news that would shatter the family's sense of security in their new home. The peaceful cottage that Kate had described as their perfect sanctuary was sitting atop a network of forgotten passages that could compromise everything the Royal Protection Unit had worked to establish. The irony wasn't lost on Morrison that the very history that made Windsor so appealing to the royal family now posed its greatest threat. The same strategic thinking that had protected previous generations during wartime could now be turned against the current occupants. Every morning walk in the gardens, every afternoon when the children played outside, every quiet evening on the terrace carried risks that the family couldn't see but that Morrison understood all too well. The security advisor knew he had to act quickly. Intelligence reports suggested that certain extremist groups had been researching royal residences with particular interest in lesser-known historical features. The combination of accessible tunnel systems and publicly available information created a perfect storm of vulnerability that required immediate attention. Morrison's team had already begun preliminary work to seal the most obvious entry points, but the scope of the underground network meant that comprehensive security measures would take months to implement. Time was running short, and Morrison realized that the longer the family remained unaware of these hidden perils, the greater the risk became. The cottage that had promised peace and privacy for William, Kate, and their children was actually a security nightmare waiting to unfold. The beautiful estate that represented everything the royal family valued about their private life had become a symbol of how even the most carefully chosen sanctuary could harbor unexpected dangers. The urgent meeting was called for that same afternoon in the cottage's private study. Morrison had requested the presence of both William and Kate, emphasizing that the matter required their immediate attention. The security advisor arrived carrying a thick folder of documents, surveillance photographs, and historical maps that would forever change how the royal couple viewed their new home. Kate noticed Morrison's unusual demeanor immediately. The typically composed security chief appeared, visibly stressed, his hands trembling slightly as he arranged the papers on William's desk. She exchanged a worried glance with her husband, both sensing that whatever news Morrison carried was far more serious than routine security updates they'd grown accustomed to receiving. Morrison began by explaining his team's discovery of the underground tunnel network. As he spread out the historical blueprints alongside modern ground-penetrating radar images, the full scope of the problem became clear. The tunnels didn't just run beneath their property, they extended far beyond the estate's boundaries, connecting to drainage systems, abandoned air raid shelters, and even the foundations of buildings in nearby Windsor town center. William studied the maps with growing alarm, tracing the tunnel routes with his finger. Some passages ran directly beneath the children's playground area where George, Charlotte, and Louis spent their afternoons. Others passed under the cottage's main living areas, including their private bedroom suite. The realization that strangers could theoretically access points directly beneath their most intimate family spaces sent a chill through both parents. The security briefing revealed even more disturbing details. Morrison's investigation had uncovered evidence that urban explorers had been using these tunnels for years, treating them as an underground adventure playground. Social media posts dating back several months showed photographs taken from inside the tunnel system, some clearly showing the cottage's foundations from below. Comments on these posts included detailed discussions about access points and navigation routes through the underground maze. Kate's face paled as Morrison showed her screenshots from various online forums where people discussed the royal tunnels with casual enthusiasm. Amateur historians shared stories about discovering military artifacts in the passages, while thrill seekers posted videos of their underground explorations. None of these individuals appeared to have malicious intent, but their public documentation of the tunnel system had created a roadmap that anyone could follow. Morrison explained that his greatest concern wasn't the curious explorers or history enthusiasts, but rather the possibility that hostile actors might use this publicly available information for darker purposes. Intelligence agencies had recently intercepted communications suggesting that certain extremist groups were researching vulnerabilities in royal security arrangements. The combination of accessible tunnels and detailed online documentation created an unprecedented security risk that required immediate action. The security chief presented his preliminary assessment of necessary countermeasures. Sealing all tunnel entrances would require extensive excavation work that could take months to complete. Installing comprehensive surveillance systems throughout the accessible portions of the underground network would be technically challenging and extremely expensive. Most concerning of all, the work required to secure the tunnels might draw unwanted attention to their existence, potentially creating more problems than it solved. William asked the question that both parents were dreading: whether the family should consider relocating while the security issues were addressed. Morrison admitted that temporary relocation might be the safest option, but he also understood the emotional impact such a decision would have on the children, who had already begun to think of Adelaide Cottage as their permanent home. The meeting continued for over 2 hours as Morrison outlined various security scenarios and potential solutions. Each option presented its own challenges and risks. Staying at the cottage meant accepting ongoing vulnerability until comprehensive security measures could be implemented. Leaving meant disrupting the family's carefully established routines and disappointing the children who had grown attached to their new environment. As the afternoon shadows lengthened, William and Kate realized that their dream of a peaceful family retreat had been transformed into a complex security puzzle with no easy solutions. The cottage that had represented freedom from the constraints of royal protocol now felt like a trap, surrounded by hidden dangers that threatened everything they held most precious. The following morning brought new urgency to an already tense situation. Morrison received a call from his intelligence contacts at 5:30 in the morning, informing him that overnight monitoring had detected unusual activity near one of the tunnel entrance points located approximately half a mile from the cottage grounds. Security cameras positioned at the perimeter had captured images of 2 individuals using flashlights to examine what appeared to be a concealed entrance hidden beneath overgrown vegetation. Kate was in the kitchen preparing breakfast for the children when Morrison arrived with this latest development. The sight of the security chief's grim expression told her immediately that the situation had escalated beyond their worst fears. William joined them moments later, still in his running clothes after cutting short his morning jog around the estate grounds when Morrison's urgent message reached him. The overnight surveillance footage showed two figures dressed in dark clothing, equipped with what appeared to be professional exploration gear, including climbing ropes, mapping equipment, and high-powered flashlights. Most concerning was their systematic approach to examining the tunnel entrance, suggesting they possessed detailed knowledge of the underground network rather than stumbling upon it by accident. Their movements indicated careful planning and preparation that went far beyond casual urban exploration. Morrison's team had immediately dispatched plainclothes officers to investigate the area, but the individuals had disappeared by the time security personnel arrived at the scene. However, they left behind evidence of their presence, including footprints, disturbed vegetation, and what appeared to be chalk markings on nearby trees that could indicate a navigation system for future visits. The security advisor explained that this incident represented a fundamental shift in threat assessment. What had previously been viewed as a potential vulnerability had now become an active security breach. The presence of organized individuals conducting reconnaissance near the tunnel system suggested that someone was gathering intelligence about the underground network with specific objectives in mind. William demanded to know how this could have happened, despite the increased security measures that had been implemented following the previous day's briefing. Morrison admitted that his team was still in the process of mapping all potential access points to the tunnel system. The underground network was far more extensive than initial investigations had revealed, with multiple branches and connections that made comprehensive surveillance extremely challenging. The conversation turned to immediate protective measures for the family. Morrison recommended that the children's outdoor activities be restricted to areas that his team could guarantee were not positioned above tunnel routes. This meant that large portions of the cottage grounds, including their favorite play areas and garden spaces, would be off limits until further notice. Kate struggled with the implications of these restrictions for her children's daily routines. George, Charlotte, and Louis had spent weeks settling into their new environment, developing favorite spots throughout the gardens where they played elaborate games and explored nature. Confining them to limited areas without explanation would require careful handling to avoid frightening them while maintaining necessary security protocols. The security briefing revealed additional concerns about the cottage's staff arrangements. Several groundskeepers, maintenance workers, and household staff had access to various parts of the property during their regular duties. Each of these individuals now required enhanced background checks and continuous monitoring to ensure that none of them possessed knowledge about the tunnel system that could be exploited or shared with unauthorized parties. Morrison's investigation had also uncovered historical records indicating that during World War II, local residents had been given emergency access to the tunnel network during air raids. While most of these families had moved away over the decades, some elderly residents in nearby Windsor still retained knowledge about the underground passages. The possibility that this information had been passed down through generations created another layer of security complexity that needed to be addressed. The morning briefing concluded with Morrison's recommendation that the family consider relocating to Kensington Palace while comprehensive security measures were implemented at Adelaide Cottage. The alternative was accepting ongoing risk while living above a compromised underground network that hostile actors were actively investigating. Both options carried significant personal and logistical challenges that would impact every aspect of the family's carefully structured life. As William and Kate absorbed the full implications of their security situation, they realized that their decision about staying or leaving would need to be made quickly. Each day they remained at the cottage potentially increased their exposure to threats they couldn't see, but that were growing more organized and determined with each passing hour. By evening, the situation had deteriorated further when Morrison's team discovered evidence of a much more sophisticated operation targeting the royal family's new residence. Digital forensics experts analyzing internet traffic around Windsor had identified coordinated online research activities focusing specifically on Adelaide Cottage and its historical features. Multiple individuals using encrypted communication networks had been sharing detailed information about the tunnel systems, including recently taken photographs and updated access route maps. The investigation revealed that these weren't random urban explorers or history enthusiasts, but rather individuals with technical expertise who were conducting systematic intelligence gathering. Their online communications included discussions about security patrol patterns, staff schedules, and even detailed observations about the family's daily routines. Someone had been watching the cottage for weeks, documenting movements and identifying potential vulnerabilities with military precision. William felt his blood run cold as Morrison explained that the surveillance appeared to include tracking the children's activities. Observers had noted the times when George, Charlotte, and Louis typically played outside, the routes they took during their bicycle rides, and even their favorite hiding spots during games of hide-and-seek. The level of detail suggested prolonged observation using professional surveillance equipment positioned at multiple vantage points around the estate. Kate's immediate concern focused on how this level of surveillance could have occurred without detection by the Royal Protection Unit. Morrison admitted that his team's security protocols had been designed to prevent direct approaches to the cottage and its grounds, but hadn't anticipated indirect surveillance from positions outside the secured perimeter. The combination of long-range observation equipment and detailed knowledge of the underground tunnel network had created blind spots in their defensive strategy. The security briefing revealed that the coordinated online research had intensified following recent media coverage about the royal family's move to Adelaide Cottage. News reports celebrating their new private family retreat had inadvertently provided additional information that helped hostile actors understand the property's layout and significance. Even carefully worded official statements about their relocation had contained details that could be pieced together to create intelligence profiles. Morrison's digital investigation team had traced some of the encrypted communications to overseas servers, suggesting that the surveillance operation had international connections. While they couldn't definitively identify the individuals behind the coordinated research, the sophistication of their methods indicated resources and expertise that went far beyond casual curiosity or amateur exploration activities. The security advisor presented evidence that the group conducting surveillance had attempted to recruit local contacts who could provide insider information about the cottage and its surroundings. Approaches had been made to several Windsor residents, including some who worked in service industries that occasionally provided supplies or services to the royal estate. Most of these individuals had reported the suspicious contacts to local police, but the attempts indicated an escalating level of operational planning. William demanded to know what additional security measures could be implemented immediately, while longer-term solutions were developed. Morrison outlined emergency protocols that included increased patrol frequency, installation of advanced detection equipment throughout the cottage grounds, and coordination with local law enforcement to monitor all known tunnel access points simultaneously. However, these immediate measures came with significant lifestyle restrictions for the family. The children would need to remain indoors during certain hours when security sweeps were conducted. Family activities would require advanced planning and coordination with multiple security teams. Even simple evening walks in their garden would need armed escorts and predetermined safe routes that avoided areas above the tunnel network. The security briefing also addressed the challenging decision about public disclosure of the threats facing the family. Media coverage of their security concerns could help generate public awareness and potentially discourage hostile activities, but it might also attract additional unwanted attention or inspire copycat surveillance efforts by other groups with anti-royal sentiments. Kate expressed frustration that their attempt to create a normal family environment for their children had instead exposed them to unprecedented risks. The cottage that was supposed to provide refuge from public scrutiny had become the center of hostile attention that threatened their most basic sense of safety and security. Morrison concluded the evening briefing by emphasizing that the threat level had now escalated to the point where remaining at Adelaide Cottage represented an unacceptable risk. The combination of underground vulnerabilities, coordinated surveillance, and organized intelligence gathering indicated that hostile actors were moving beyond reconnaissance toward potential operational planning. The time for difficult decisions about the family's immediate future had arrived, and those decisions couldn't be delayed much longer without potentially catastrophic consequences. As William and Kate tucked their children into bed that night, they knew it might be among their last evenings in the home they had hoped would become their permanent sanctuary. The crisis reached its peak when Morrison's surveillance team detected movement within the tunnel system itself. during the early hours of the morning. Ground-based sensors that had been hastily installed at key points throughout the underground network registered vibrations consistent with human movement approximately 50 meters beneath the cottage's main living areas. The security alert that followed mobilized every available protection officer and transformed Adelaide Cottage into a fortress under siege. William and Kate were awakened at 3:15 by armed officers entering their bedroom with instructions to gather the children immediately and move to the cottage's designated safe room. The confusion and fear in their children's eyes as they were hurriedly dressed and escorted through darkened hallways created a scene that would haunt both parents for years to come. George, Charlotte, and Louis had no understanding of why their peaceful night had suddenly become a nightmare of whispered commands and urgent movement. The safe room, located in the cottage's reinforced basement, had been installed during the initial security preparations but never expected to be needed so soon. As the family huddled together in the cramped space listening to radio communications between security teams, the reality of their situation became terrifyingly clear. Their dream home had become a target, and their children were experiencing the trauma that William and Kate had worked so hard to protect them from. Morrison coordinated the emergency response from a mobile command center established in the cottage's courtyard. His teams had sealed all known tunnel entrances and were conducting systematic searches of the underground network using specialized equipment borrowed from military counterterrorism units. The operation required careful balance between thoroughness and speed, as each minute spent searching increased the risk that hostile actors might escape through undiscovered passages. The search teams discovered evidence of recent human presence within the tunnels, including fresh footprints, discarded food packaging, and what appeared to be makeshift camps where individuals had spent extended periods observing the cottage from below. Most disturbing was the discovery of professionally installed surveillance equipment, positioned at strategic points throughout the tunnel system, suggesting that the royal family's private conversations and activities had been monitored for an unknown period. Kate struggled to maintain composure as she comforted her frightened children in the safe room, knowing that their sense of security had been permanently damaged by this ordeal. The innocent excitement that Charlotte had shown while exploring their new garden just days earlier now seemed like a memory from another lifetime, replaced by the harsh reality of threats that no child should ever need to understand. The tactical teams eventually apprehended 2 individuals attempting to exit the tunnel system through a concealed entrance located nearly a mile from the cottage grounds. The suspects, both foreign nationals with no legal right to be in the United Kingdom, carried sophisticated surveillance equipment, detailed maps of the tunnel network, and encrypted communication devices that suggested coordination with a larger operational cell. Morrison's preliminary interrogation of the suspects revealed the existence of a more extensive plot, targeting multiple royal residences. Adelaide Cottage had been selected as an initial target because its historical tunnel network provided unprecedented access opportunities. But the group's ultimate objectives appeared to involve gathering intelligence that could be used for future operations against other members of the royal family. The security investigation expanded rapidly as intelligence agencies worked to identify other members of the hostile network and assess potential threats to additional royal properties. The discovery that Adelaide Cottage represented just one component of a broader campaign against the royal family elevated the threat level beyond anything that had been anticipated when William and Kate first decided to relocate to their Windsor retreat. As dawn approached and the immediate danger subsided, the family remained in the safe room while Morrison's teams conducted comprehensive security sweeps of the entire cottage and grounds. Every room needed to be examined for possible surveillance devices. Every tunnel entrance required reinforcement, and every staff member with access to the property needed enhanced background screening before normal operations could resume. Children's questions about why they had been awakened and moved to the safe room created painful conversations for William and Kate. Explaining the existence of threats against their family without creating lasting psychological trauma required careful consideration of how much information to share with their young children, who deserved honesty, but also needed protection from the full horror of their circumstances. Morrison informed the royal couple that regardless of the success in apprehending the immediate suspects, the compromise of Adelaide Cottage's security meant that remaining at the residence was no longer viable. The tunnel network, even if completely sealed, would always represent a vulnerability that hostile actors could potentially exploit. More importantly, the property's location and layout had been thoroughly studied by individuals with malicious intent, creating ongoing risks that couldn't be completely eliminated through conventional security measures. 3 weeks after the terrifying night that changed everything, William and Kate stood in the empty rooms of Adelaide Cottage one final time before their permanent relocation to a more secure residence. The cottage that had once represented their hopes for a normal family life now felt like a beautiful prison that had nearly cost them everything they held dear. Sunlight still streamed through the windows onto floors where their children had played just days earlier. But the peaceful atmosphere they had once cherished was forever tainted by the knowledge of what lay hidden beneath. The investigation into the surveillance network had revealed the full scope of the threat they had unknowingly faced. Intelligence agencies working with Morrison's team discovered that the hostile group had been planning their operation for over 18 months, beginning their research long before William and Kate had even considered Adelaide Cottage as their new home. The tunnel network had been mapped and studied with extraordinary detail, and the group had established multiple observation points that provided comprehensive surveillance coverage of the cottage grounds. Morrison's final security briefing painted a sobering picture of how close the family had come to a potentially catastrophic security breach. The surveillance equipment discovered in the tunnels included devices capable of intercepting electronic communications, recording private conversations, and tracking movement patterns throughout the cottage. The hostile actors had accumulated enough intelligence to predict the family's daily routines with frightening accuracy, creating opportunities for operations that could have resulted in kidnapping, assassination, or other unthinkable scenarios. The children's adjustment to their sudden departure from Adelaide Cottage proved more difficult than William and Kate had anticipated. George had formed particular attachments to specific areas of the garden where he had built elaborate adventure courses, while Charlotte mourned the loss of her secret reading spot beneath an ancient oak tree. Louis, though too young to fully understand the circumstances, clearly sensed the anxiety and sadness that surrounded the family's hasty departure from what he had begun to consider his permanent home. Kate found herself struggling with feelings of guilt about the decision to move to Adelaide Cottage in the first place. She had been the strongest advocate for choosing the Windsor residence, drawn to its charm and the promise of privacy it seemed to offer. The realization that her desire for a normal family environment had instead exposed her children to unprecedented dangers created a burden of responsibility that would take years to process and overcome. The broader security implications of the Adelaide Cottage incident forced comprehensive reviews of protection protocols for all royal residences. Historical vulnerability assessments were conducted at properties throughout the royal estate system, identifying dozens of potential security concerns that had been overlooked during previous evaluations. The tunnel network at Windsor represented just one example of how historical features could create modern security risks that traditional protection methods weren't designed to address. William's relationship with the concept of privacy underwent a fundamental transformation following their ordeal at Adelaide Cottage. The dream of creating a normal family environment, free from the constant presence of security personnel and elaborate protective measures, now seemed naive and potentially dangerous. Every future resident's decision would need to prioritize security considerations over personal preferences, regardless of the impact on their children's experiences or the family's quality of life. Morrison remained as the family's chief security advisor, but the Adelaide Cottage incident had taught everyone involved that even the most experienced protection professionals could be surprised by evolving threats. The hostile group's use of historical tunnel networks represented a new category of security challenge that required innovative defensive strategies and constant vigilance against threats that might emerge from unexpected directions. The final weeks of investigation revealed that the network targeting Adelaide Cottage had connections to similar surveillance operations conducted against other high-profile families throughout Europe. The royal family's ordeal represented part of a broader pattern of sophisticated intelligence gathering that suggested organized criminal or terrorist networks were developing new methods for penetrating the security arrangements that protected prominent public figures. As their convoy departed Adelaide Cottage for the final time, Kate turned to look back at the ivy-covered walls and peaceful gardens that had briefly represented their ideal family home. The cottage would eventually be repurposed for other uses within the royal estate, but it would never again serve as a private residence due to the irreparable compromise of its security profile. The tunnel network would be permanently sealed, the surveillance equipment removed, and comprehensive security measures installed to prevent any future unauthorized access. The Adelaide Cottage chapter of their family's story had ended, not with the peaceful memories they had hoped to create, but with the sobering reminder that their position within the royal family carried risks that no security measures could completely eliminate. Their children would grow up with enhanced awareness of the threats that surrounded their family, but also with the knowledge that their parents would always prioritize their safety above all other considerations, even when that meant sacrificing dreams of the normal childhood that every parent wishes they could provide.